Hey, Marcus Hutzel here, and I wanted to do a quick-ish video about these two broadcast monitors from Seetec, and they are the Seetec P133-9HSD and the Seetec P133 Pro. They are both 13.3-inch monitors. They are similarly priced. One of them is $470. That's the Seetec P133-9HSD, which is on my right here. The other one is the Seetec P133 Pro at $540. So not a lot of price difference, but for me, there's quite a bit of a difference in these monitors, both in ergonomics and in color and just overall features. And recently I was in need of another monitor. Okay, need may be a strong word, but I wanted a 13-inch monitor to sit here at my desk and that I could take out on live event productions, because 15 inches for me here at my desk was a little too much. And obviously a 15-inch monitor is just larger, and of course it requires a larger case if you want to take it out on live productions. And I've been trying to make my live events just more compact and portable. And the 13-inch class of monitors also fit very well into my workflow, because a lot of people are carrying around 13-inch laptops, and when I'm doing video editing and sending out to clients, they are often watching on laptops. I figured 13 was the smallest because most laptops are not going to be under 13 inches. So it's a good reference in size for a device that an end user may be carrying out in the real world. So again, just wanted something small and something as accurate as I could get to my own eyes and how I know to use the tool, so that when I am using these for color grading and sending out to clients, that it still looks as close on one of these monitors as it does on multiple laptops out in the world. So with that out of the way, I just want to talk about these two and which one I'm keeping. So again, the P133-9HSD is the more budget model. It is a slightly older model. It has older connections on the back. It has buttons on the front that give an audible click, whereas the P133 Pro has soft buttons that really don't make any sound at all. And that may not be a big deal to you, but I've been in live events where the room is really quiet and clicky buttons can actually be more audible than you think. So just something to keep in mind. They can both be powered by V-mount batteries, and I'm actually powering the P133-9HSD with a V-mount battery right now, and I'm powering the P133 Pro with its own power supply. They obviously both have lots of inputs and outputs on the back, and looking at the back of both monitors, the 9HSD, there is an HDMI in and out. There is a 3G SDI in and out, but there is only one SDI and one HDMI in, whereas the P133 Pro has two HDMI ins with an HDMI out, and it has two SDI ins and two SDI pass-throughs out of those inputs. And there is a DVI input on the P133 Pro. Whereas the rest of the inputs on the 9HSD are these older style component Y, PB, PR, and probably an S-video connection. That's not an SDI input, that's probably old school S-video. And it does have a DVI input as well. But I really like the dual SDI and dual HDMI inputs on the P133 Pro. It obviously gives me 4 inputs into the monitor, so I can switch between those. Whereas I'm really only ever going to use the SDI and HDMI, maybe the DVI on this monitor, but I don't carry a lot of DVI cables around anymore, so I just find that the P133 Pro has more modern connections for what we need these days. And the P133 Pro has an additional plexiglass cover on the front, which you can remove by taking out these 4 screws, but that is something I'm going to be keeping on the monitor to protect the screen more when I take it out on live events. And the 9HSD also comes with a sunshade. But one of the important things to keep in mind is that the P133-9HSD has 0 video scopes. Okay, other than check field, which lets you put the monitor into mono or look at the red channel, the green channel, or the blue channel. But I find this is only helpful if you have color bars to look at and if you have enough adjustments on your monitor to correct anything and you have to actually know what to look for. So if we look at color bars real quick, these are being generated from my GH5. Let's go into our check field mode. Let's put them both in blue. This is really the only mode I know how to check them in. And actually the 9HSD is showing me something about this check field function that's incorrect. This bar here shouldn't be as dark. Now if I just grab the saturation and move it a little bit, it jumps back into where it's supposed to be. So by just hitting the check field on the 9HSD, it's not actually showing you things that are accurate. So sure, it has check field, but unless you know what you're looking for and that this one is actually showing you a slight error, then it may not be that much help to you. And the 9HSD does have a focus assist feature like peeking on your camera, but I really don't like focus assist features. I find that they're not terribly accurate really on any device, so I just try to use my eyes or use a zoom in function of the monitor to make sure I'm in focus. But really, other than that, there are no true scopes on the 9HSD. It does not have false color. It does not have waveforms. It does not even have zebras. There's no way on the 9HSD to tell if your image is overexposed in the image file itself. And I knew that going in, and I was willing to try it out mainly because it comes with a stand that you can set down on a desk and then angle the monitor up towards your face and get it in line with where it's going to sit. Whereas the P133 Pro has a host of scopes. It has false color, it has waveforms, it has all of your other waveforms, your RGB waveforms, it has a vector scope. So this is the much better monitor in terms of needing to know where your exposure is and your colors when taking this out into the field. I thought maybe I could deal with the lack of scopes, but ultimately, no, I can't. I just think that anything that's sold as a production or broadcast monitor should have scopes in it. It should at least have false color. And even the Seetec A10156 that I have has false color, so it has some way to tell your exposure. So that's one reason why the P133 Pro is much better. It just has all of the scopes that you're going to need to make sure your color and exposure is where it needs to be in your video image. So why did I even bother trying both? And you're going to think maybe that this is kind of a non-issue, but it was a big issue for me. You can see here that the P133 Pro comes with flat feet. And of course you can just set it on a desk and there it sits. While again, the P133-9HSD comes on this kind of yoke mount where you can tilt it up and down and get to the angle you need. So if you sit it low on a desk, you can angle it up to where it's on the same plane as your face. Whereas the P133 Pro, when you set it down, like, putting it on a table when you're setting up for a live event production, great, it sits down, but now I can't actually see it that well because it's facing my chest. And if we look over at that shot, like, I don't know about you, but my neck, there we go. Now I'm in line with the monitor, but this doesn't really work. It's okay, so we find something to stack it up on and just get it up at eye level. But when you are taking these out on live event productions, again, often you're only given or request a table at your venue. So I'm often having to find cases to stack high enough to get to eye level so I can put my broadcast monitors up at eye level. Or I guess I could just take something like this little aperture light and lean the monitor back and then put it under there, and at least now it's facing me. But to have to find something that doesn't come with the monitor and just lean it back every time, to me is not terribly professional. So I just don't always get these flat feet. And this isn't limited to Seetec either. High-end Sony broadcast monitors have the same style feet. And I just don't understand why companies put feet like this on high-end monitors. They're just expecting that you'll always be able to easily put it up at eye level. And again, that's just not the case, especially on temporary productions, which is why I really like the yoke mount of the P133-9HSD. So I thought, well, these are both 13.3 inch monitors. Would the yoke from the 9HSD fit on this? So I actually emailed Seetec and they said, no, the yoke from this one, sorry, it won't work on the P133 Pro. So I was like, well, do I just deal with the lack of scopes? Or do I deal with having to put this up high? Or what do I do? I'm gonna come back to that in just a second with the yoke from the 9HSD fitting on here, come right back to that. But I wanna talk about color for a second because honestly, as soon as I got these out of the box, put them down and gave them a signal, the P133-9HSD, to me, it's okay, but the P133 Pro, the exact same signal going to both monitors, what I see is just more true to life. But the main thing for me on the 9HSD is how magenta or pink the image is when you don't do any alteration. When the stock settings coming out of the box, the image is just more pink, and I see it more in my cheeks, I see it more in my lips. And if I'm going to try to color grade to that, I might pull more red out of my signal because this monitor is showing me more pinks and reds at the screen than may be present in the signal. So if I dial those out in the camera or in my video edit, then you may have pulled out too much, and your ultimate video file when viewed on other monitors and other laptops may look too green or may just look desaturated in the reds. Whereas the P133 Pro with the exact same signal, again, to me looks more accurate. And I know this is going to be really hard to tell watching a video with a camera filming screens, but I've tried to get my other camera here that I'm looking at in my monitor over here so I can verify that it looks as close on that recording as it does to my eye. If we just look at me side by side here, I'm definitely more pink in the 9HSD than I am over here. And when I take this recording and I open it up on my MacBook Pro, it looks way more like this one than it does this one. And in addition to that, the contrast is just higher on this one. And what I mean by that is that if I look at my skin tones on the 9HSD, everything's just a little flatter. It's a little smoother, which you might think is good, but that can mask true highlights where I'm getting bounces of light off my forehead. Whereas over on the P133 Pro, you may actually notice you're getting maybe too much light bounce, which could mean that your exposure is too high, maybe your light's too bright, maybe your ISO is set too high on the camera. So the 9HSD just gives a bit more of a flat image overall, where again, to my eye, the 133 Pro is just more accurate. And here real quick, I'm going to put a different image on both of these monitors. It's going to be an image from YouTube so we can take a look at some other content from my laptop as opposed to the image just from that camera. So hang on. All right, so here is an image of Curtis Judd. Curtis, I hope you don't mind. And I just wanted an example of how these monitors show skin tones a bit differently. So I've tried to dial this camera over here in to as close of a color rendition in that camera as I see to my eye. So if we look at Curtis here, we can see the contrast differences a bit on his cheek here and on his forehead. You just get more light coming off the monitor in those areas than you do over here. And you can see how much warmer and a little bit more red he appears over here. So again, if you don't take the time to try to calibrate your monitors, you may try color grading your live image on a live stream to this. You'd pull out a bunch of reds, and then your live stream would look very blue or just unsaturated. But on the 9HSD, there's no way to really check because there are no scopes. There's no vector scope, there's no waveforms, there's no RGB waveforms. So how do you really know? And I just thought that this image was another good example to show you the differences of how these monitors display colors to you with the stock settings right out of the box. And yes, of course, on any monitor, you can go into the menu, even on the 9HSD, and go down and change the picture mode to something different, put it on its mild setting, or go down to the color temperature, put it on user, and dial out some red. But you'd be quite surprised at how many technicians on live event productions don't always go through this process. They're just trusting that the monitor and their signal is good. And so if they're presented with an image that's either overly green or overly blue, again, they may start telling their camera operators to dial that out of their cameras when it's not really present in the image. So for me, that's just one more thing about the 9HSD that's just going to cause less experienced technicians out in the real world to be able to really tell what's going on, whereas the P133 Pro looks more to my eye like what you will get in a recorded video file when viewed on multiple other laptops like MacBook Pros and even my Dell XPS 13. This image to me is just more accurate. Not to mention the fact you get all those scopes. I mean, literally just one button I can push and I get false color. It's right there. I can see immediately if I need to go to that camera and dial down the ISO or turn my lights down or whatever. There's just no way to do that on the 9HSD. And I don't want to harp on the 9HSD too much. It is a nice, clean, crisp image. Everything looks sharp. I do feel that the reds are oversaturated in the default color mode, but you can just dig into those menus, change your color temperature, dial out saturation in either the red, green, or blue channels, and you can absolutely get this monitor looking better than it comes out of the box, and you can then trust it. Although I do recommend having another monitor to at least reference when you are setting up your color, but you can absolutely make it work. There's no need to spend the little bit of extra money to get the P133 Pro, but there's only a $70 difference between these monitors. So for only $70, you get what is, in my opinion, a much better image, and you get all of the scopes that you need to check exposure and color. And to me, that very small price difference is absolutely worth it. But what to do about this ergonomic issue with these flat feet? That's another reason I bought both. Again, I wanted to see what the color difference was and if I could deal without scopes. I really can't deal without scopes, so the 9HSD is going back. But since I did have it for a minute, I wanted to take the yoke mount off and see if it would fit on the P133 Pro. And even though Seetec said it wouldn't, I have them here. It's a few screws. Take this yoke off, see if it fits here. And so let's do that real quick and see if it works. All right, I thought we'd do this in the garage where there's a little more room to work. Now, the entire reason that I'm bringing up whether the bracket from the 9HSD would even fit on the P133 Pro is because Seetec actually sells that yoke mount for the 9HSD by itself as a standalone item. So if it does work when I take it off and put it on here, then I could just buy one like I've already done, and then I wouldn't have to buy both monitors just to get the yoke mount of that one over there. So let's put this one away for a second. So now we'll just take this one off of the 9HSD, see if it'll fit. And you don't really need any special tools necessarily because this comes disassembled in the box when you buy it. So it's literally just thumb turn screws that you unscrew and take these off. So let me do that real quick. The one on the left, on the right, put this somewhere safely for a second. And we'll remove the feet from the P133. These also do not come pre-assembled on the monitor. They come loose in the box. So, does it fit? It's a little tight, but also I forgot to mention that the P133 Pro does have 1/4-20 mounting holes on the side, so they should line up with this bracket. So let's slip it back in there. All right, so it fits, but it's not perfect. And if you look here on this close-up, even though the monitor does fit well within the U bracket, if you look really closely here, it rubs just a little bit on the inside of that bracket on both the left and the right. So if you're okay with getting a few minor scratches over time from the monitor rubbing on the bracket, then you're mostly done. The two side bolts here are a little too long with the P133, so you can just put some washers in there and that will tighten things up, but otherwise it doesn't really want to tighten down fully. And if we take a look at the bracket by itself, hang on. The bracket actually comes in 3 pieces. These thumb screws come out and the side comes off and the other one comes off, and that's how it's shipped in 3 pieces so it can lie flat. So because the yoke mount is just a little too narrow and might scratch the side of the monitor, all I really need to do is get this bracket just to sit a little further out from the bottom of the yoke mount on both sides. Basically just making these 2 uprights just a little further out. That gives enough clearance so that the monitor won't rub on the insides of the bracket when it swings and you need to angle it to the angle that you need to set it to. So I just got a set of plastic spacers of various sizes. This one's kind of a long one, but all I needed was 4 little plastic spacers, or you could just use a 1/4-20 nut so that you can just create a little bit of space between the upright outside bracket and the bottom piece so that when you reattach it, again, that upright is just about 1/4 of an inch out on both sides from that bottom bracket. So let's assemble that real quick. Oh, almost forgot one more thing. The thumb screws that come with the bracket are only so long so that if you do put a spacer in there, the thumb screws that came with it were still long enough to go through the plate, through the new spacer that I'm putting in there, and still grab the threads there on the bracket. But if you choose longer spacers, you can just get standard 1/4-20 bolts from Home Depot, get longer ones, and that's what I've done. So I'm going to not use the thumb screws that came with the bracket. I'm going to use 1/4-20 screws, and that way it's kind of flush and a little more streamlined on the outsides. So obviously fairly simple. Take my bolt, put it through the bracket, put the spacer on the inside here, because we need this spacer here so it pushes this upright bracket away from the bottom plate when the bolt is reinserted. So here I've got 2 of those prepped. We'll put it on the bottom bracket. Screw them in. And there, now with those spacers in there, our uprights are now just about 1/4 inch outside of that bottom bracket, giving us a bit more width for our P133 Pro monitor. And this also comes with little rubber protectors that go in between those side holes and the monitor itself, so you don't scratch the monitor even more. And again, I found the side screws that came with the individual bracket were still a bit long. So I found that just adding a washer or 2 in between the thumb screw going through the bracket into the monitor takes up that extra space, and then you're able to tighten it down. And I felt there was just a little more space than I wanted. So on this side, I actually just put 2 washers between that bolt and the bracket. All right, so now with our spacers in there, again, pushing those uprights further out, the monitor no longer rubs the sides. And as you can see, it still clears the bottom where the U bracket on the bottom meets the side. The monitor still clears that only by about 1/8 of an inch, but it clears and it's just not rubbing or scratching on anything. So I'm confident that this is going to work well in the long run. And there you go. Now the P133 Pro, in my opinion, is more professional because you can actually put it down on a desk and aim it at you instead of having to get down low because of the flat feet it came with. Now, when I ordered this, Seetec was out of the individual bracket on their own website, but I found it on AliExpress. It cost me about $43 total, took a couple of weeks to come in. And of course, the plastic spacers and the bolts cost a couple of bucks at Home Depot. So about $45 to $50 extra on top of the cost of the P133, just so I can have, you know, an articulating screen. So yes, the bracket from the 9HSD does fit, and I'm sure you all really wanted to know that. I'm probably the only person out there that kind of thought this was an issue with the P133 Pro, but now I have a really great looking monitor with all the scopes I need and a mounting system to where I can take it, angle it, and with the bracket, I can now then, you know, hang it upside down and mount it vertically, hang it off of something on a tripod. It does have 3 more mounting positions on the bottom. So the bracket is more than just an articulation system. It's also an additional mounting system. So I hope this was helpful. And if so, please leave me a comment below and I'll see you in the next one, I guess. Later.